Hello, and welcome to the Success Showcase. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin from the Modern Observer Group. And with me, as always, is Chip Janiszewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how are you doing this week?
Doing great. How about you, Eric?
Doing fantastic.
Happy autumn.
Yes, we've got a real fall day here in New England. And it is absolutely amazing how quickly the temperature went from the 80s to the 40s.
Yep, we've gone from air conditioning to heat in 1 week.
Yep. I'm a bit stubborn about this. I want a couple of weeks where I don't have to turn either one on. So we'll push through the little cold spell we've got here, but it's already warming up. But you know the old saying, if you don't like the weather in New England, wait 15 minutes, it'll change.
Yep, it's done that a bit too.
So today we're going to pay a return visit to the Success Showcase Book Club. And we're going to talk about Deepak Chopra's The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success. And Chip, this was, you brought the book to us, so I'm going to pass it over to you and kick us off.
Yeah, well, I mean, everybody's heard of Deepak Chopra, the author. And Deepak, pardon the pun, but it's intentional, can be pretty deep at times. And this is, to me, the most simple. It's a short book. If you listen to it on Audible, it's only a little over an hour long. And basically, the principle of it, he says, although this book is titled The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success, it can also be called The 7 Spiritual Laws of Life, because these are the same principles that nature uses to create everything in material existence. Then he talks about success in life could be defined as the continued expansion of happiness and the progressive realization of worthy goals. And he talks about the ability to fill our desires with effortless ease, but then we warp into the creation of wealth and everything else and so on and so forth. And so this is kind of like a really brief roadmap that kind of brings us back to basics, which Deepak likes to do, although when he's talking about basics, he can get very, very complicated. But it's something that I really feel it's a good thing to listen to, keep you grounded and so on and so forth, especially when your head is spinning around with all kinds of different things going on. It's a great way to kind of get back to the basics. And in a lot of cases, I think you're going through this book, it's maybe getting way too deep and into too basic stuff that maybe not seem real at times. So, but anyway, the first law is the one that surrounds everything, and it's called the law of pure potentiality. And he talks about our essence is our pure consciousness. Knowing who we are gives us the ability to fulfill our dreams, and all relationships are a reflection within our relationship with ourselves. In other words, everything is already there, and we just kind of have to pull it out of ourselves. When we talked about Wallace Wattles, it's kind of like the thinking stuff that's out there and that we're working with.
Yes, there were actually a lot of similarities between this book and The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace Wattles.
So he talks about awareness sleeps in minerals, it sleeps in plants, it awakens in animals, awareness becomes self-aware in humans. The good news is that we are already enlightened. The bad news is we've forgotten it. And so this is where he talks about getting a little bit into the meditative state, getting into the silent spaces between our thoughts and so on and so forth, wherein lies the potential for anything and everything. And, I know that we're getting a little bit deep here, but getting back into the different things that we've talked about in the past, it's really just observing without judging, taking that breath for a moment and just not thinking about it, just observing.
Right. There was actually a lot in this book I disagreed with, and a lot of it was, he gets a lot of the why right. It's the how that I really have a problem with. And when he's talking about pure potentiality, he talks about, well, what's really good is to be absolutely silent. And he says, every once in a while, you should do this for days. I don't know anybody who practically can do that. I mean, that is, as far as I'm concerned, unattainable for 90% of the people out there. And the other problem I have with it is he assumes that his way will work for everyone. And I can absolutely guarantee you that's not true. He talks about being at one with nature and going out into nature and enjoying that. I'm a city boy. 2 days in nature, I want to get the hell out of there. However, you put me in the middle of a city, I'm at peace. I have ideas coming. I'm, in harmony with my environment. So he assumes that because things work for him, they're going to work for everybody. And that's simply not the case. Everybody really has to find their own path to the goals he's talking about.
Yeah, obviously a lot of what he puts in there is overkill as far as what to do, and he's practiced it a long time. But the bottom line is if you just he has like steps applying the law at the end of each of these chapters, and applying law number one is taking the time every day to be silent. Now, obviously, he starts out with saying 30 days at morning and 30 days at night, but if you just get back to really number three, practice non-judgment. If you can just again pause without judging, that helps out a whole lot. So it's in that way it
Yes.
talks about every relationship being a mirror, attracting who we are, and so on and so forth. Being out and seeing the good in others instead of criticizing. I mean, these are all really, really good things,
Yes.
and
And
they're
that
so
point, yeah, that point he's got absolutely on target,
yeah.
because whatever you put out, if you're putting out negativity and you're hating people, that's what's going to come back to you. So that point he has right on target.
Yeah, and with the word potentiality, the bottom line is potentiality to me means everything good that you ever want it to happen. And if you work things the right way, it is there, it always has been, and it always will be there.
Exactly.
So, and then really logically going along, law number two is the law of giving. And I mean, that really doesn't need much explaining, but we're constantly changing and so on and so forth, and we need to give in order to receive. Goes right back to the law of attraction that we talk about all the time. And the intention behind giving, he says, should always be to create happiness, obviously, in the person that we're giving to. And we all know that whoever is giving unconditionally is receiving at least as much or even more. So he
Yeah,
talks about in that chapter, the only things that stop us from being generous are our own fear and ignorance that there's not enough in the world. It's coming from the lack perspective. So
yes,
that
and we've talked a lot about the law of giving, not just in our own conversations, but in other books that we've gone through. The Go Giver, certainly the Science of Getting Rich.
how
This
to
is a very this is a
influence
very
all that.
common theme, and it's very important because yes, if you're hoarding and you're stuck in that lack mindset, then you're not going to be able to expand and you're not going to really succeed. He did say something in this chapter that I thought was incredibly limiting. And again, I disagreed with this. And he said, you had to give what you were looking to get. And he actually says, if you're looking to get money, you should give money. If you're, and it's like, I absolutely disagree with that. If you're giving of yourself, whether it's money, whether it's time, the it's the act of giving that matters. What you're giving shouldn't matter.
Yep, I exactly hear where you're coming from there. And he does finish off with I am abundance and I am joy, so that it is already there and searching for it. Again, the specifics of this are for some people and aren't for other people. And if you just take what the laws themselves are supposed to mean without all of his how to's and just pick the ones that work for you, I think it's a really, really good formula.
Yeah, I mean, again, the basic laws are fantastic, and those, as we go through them, you'll really see that they all have their strengths. Um, there are, again, bits and pieces in the book itself that, again, I disagree with, simply because he's essentially talking about what has worked for him. And I've said this over and over again in terms of time management books, and there isn't one system that works for everybody. But if you go for these goals, the laws are the goals that you should be going to. How you get there, if you don't get there the same way he does, that's fine.
Yeah, and he does use a lot of quotes and references to Buddha and so forth, who he follows closely. I mean, when he talked about we must learn to give whatever we wish to receive, he used a quote from Buddha that said, "Thousands of candles can be lighted from a single candle, and the life of the candle will not be shortened. Happiness never decreases by being shared." Which is a general statement that's perfect, but he does say, "What are you grateful for, and what can you give away that would benefit another?" And that's really the most important thing. And every seed has the promise of sowing 1,000 forests, but you must plant the seed. So
Yes.
like when he's talking generalities a whole lot more than some of these specifics, because they do tend to get to certain people for sure as far as what they're doing. And they just because Deepak says it doesn't mean that it works for the person that's listening to him.
Right. In fact, I think the strongest parts of this book are when he's talking about the Buddhist principles. It's when he starts trying to use modern day examples that it sort of falls apart. So I think the problem is not so much with the laws or even the concept of the book. I think that's strong. I think he's just not explaining it well.
Yeah, it very well. I mean, again, I mean, I've listened to other of his Audible books and whatever, and have tried to make some sense out of it, and they're just too long and kind of too deep for me from time to time. So it's, but again, this one was pretty basic, and he does have a lot of good theory working for him, and a lot of I mean, a lot of good life. So um, the third law that he talked about is the law of karma, and this is the law of cause and effect. As you sow, so shall you reap.
Yep.
Everything that happens to us is the result of our past thoughts and actions. Every situation in life can be seen as a problem or an opportunity for growth. In other words, there's two ways of looking at everything, and cause and effect. If you're looking at things negatively, you're going to get negative back.
Right. And also I think one of the most important points that he makes in this chapter is that where you are now is the result of all of the choices you've made in the past. So you may not have liked the choice you made in the past, but you made it and it got you where you are today. And I think that's very important for people to realize because once you understand that, it really allows you to get rid of regret because you see, okay, yes, I wouldn't have done that. I wish this had happened differently. But it also means you would be a different person in a different place. And I think that's very important for people to remember.
Yeah, I kind of parlayed this a bit. I mean, he talked about the karmic software where an action leads to a memory, which you have a desire and then you have an action as a result of that. And it brings me back to really Jack Canfield's success principle number one: take 100% control of your life. And that's event plus response equals outcome. And what he's talking a lot about here is our response. The way we respond to everything is going to affect everything that we do. So everything does happen for a reason. And he talks about the karmic curse is that we have forgotten who we really are. Do we feel responsible for our life? If not, who is? Do you make choices from your head or from your heart? Do you make choices easily or worry about having to make them? Are you happy with your life? And these are all things that are really, really good questions, food for thought. And if you can turn yourself towards the positive response to these, you're on your way.
Yeah, I mean, that's also something we've talked about in the past. And it really is important for people to understand that they are responsible for their own lives. And this is something I actually just wrote an article about because you're seeing so much people saying, oh, well, it's because of something else. To the point that it's gotten ridiculous. We've almost gotten into a victim mentality. I was actually watching the news, and there was a story about a lawsuit, the Detroit public school system. sued the state, city and state because they weren't getting the resources they need. And they were absolutely right to do so. The state needed to put more resources in, but then they interviewed a student, and the student went, well, I can't really read, and I thought it was because I was dumb, but now I see that, it's the school's fault. It's like, well, no. If you knew you weren't learning to read, it's your responsibility to find a way to learn. You can't just blame the school system. You're responsible for everything that happens to you to a certain degree. And you have to make that effort to improve yourself, not just say, well, this happened, so I can't do anything about it.
Yeah, and again, it gets back to the response. It's every action has the cause and effect within it. The situation is the result of the previous action. How we respond determines future consequences. And we talked about Jack Canfield's law when he talks about event plus response equals outcome. Most people's response is to blame the outcome on the event. And blaming supposedly eases your mind by deflecting it away from you, but it solves nothing, and it's only going to come back and bite you again and again and again until you realize that the person in the mirror is responsible for a positive response if they want to make things change. And that's what this is all about.
Right. And as Jack Canfield said, an event is just an event. It's how you respond to it that makes it what it is. And so you have to take responsibility for that response.
Yeah, I mean, applying the law in this one looks pretty good. He talks about three different things in applying this law. And he says, number one, be conscious of the choices that you make. And number two, what are the consequences of my choices for others and for yourself? And number three, ask your heart or your higher self for guidance. And usually your first impulse or intuition is the right one. So, one of our biggest problems is that our minds are so busy and we always do the what ifs and the yes buts and all that kind of stuff. And if we get more back to the basics, which obviously Deepak is really, really all about, so much so that most of us can't understand it a lot of times, that's what this is all about, being conscious of the choices, going with your intuition, and really what's it going to do, what's the consequence for myself, what's the consequence for what I'm doing for others.
Right. And going with your intuition, it really is very important. Um, to pull another book into the conversation, Malcolm Gladwell's Blink talks all about the fact that in the blink of an eye, you get so much information that you're not consciously registering. So, what we think of as intuition is actually your gut response to all of the information you're getting. So, it's not just, well, I'm flying by the seat of my pants. You actually have information to make these decisions on. You have to trust yourself to make them.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about positive mindset, and working towards the positive mindset is going to help you out a whole lot. Um, Getting into law four, it's kind of connecting to that's really between the first three. This one's the law of least effort, and it says do less and accomplish more, do nothing and accomplish everything. When actions are motivated by love, there is no effort. The moment is exactly as it should be. And what this is talking about is accepting people's and situations and events as they recur, taking responsibility for your situation and for all the events. So it's a logical, law number four for the first three ahead of it. And the bottom line is that if you are practicing the law of karma in what's going on in your life, you're going to really need less effort to accomplish things, and you're going to accomplish a whole lot more just by doing that and being in the right mindset.
Yeah, this is a law that I certainly appreciate, especially as an operations guy, because when you're putting processes together, this is the ultimate goal right here is you want everything to go as smoothly as possible with very little friction. You want everything to be able to move through. So this is a huge goal. Now, I had a problem when he started getting into the nitty gritty because he started saying even when you set your goals, if things take you away from that goal, you have to accept that. That's fine, and just take whatever comes. I don't know any really successful person that has put forward a goal and then been fine if it didn't happen.
Yeah, totally understood. But what he's talking about, as far as maybe it's the way that again, a lot of this has to do with response. And one of the things that he talks about is instead of running after happiness, tap into the happiness that surrounds you. In other words, appreciate what's out there. And again, if you can pause for a minute and do that, the answer might be right there. It might come to you right away just by looking for, looking into the happiness that surrounds you and understanding that there are solutions out there. And if you just silence yourself without thinking, a lot of times all of a sudden something hits you and that's it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, you do need to be able to appreciate what's around you. Um, Again, the difficulty I had with this one is where he's essentially saying, to be really successful, be happy with what you already have. And it's like, and that's great, but that's, it's sort of lowered expectations. I'm happy when nothing goes wrong, but it's human nature to want more. And I think also when you're pushing forward, especially for a big goal, something that's really going to affect people and help people, the whole reason you're doing this is because you're not happy with the situation as is, because you see things that need to be changed. And in fact, most of the great accomplishments that people make are because they see something that's not right and they want to fix it. And
Yep.
I think this sort of takes away from that.
Yeah, I mean, thinking deeper about Deepak in this one, though, instead of running after happiness, tap into the happiness that surrounds you. Uh, Nature functions with effortless ease. If you kind of put, humanity and your business partners and so on and so forth into that nature function, and you're working in collaboration with that, perhaps that's what he's subconsciously driving towards. Is that instead of going it alone, uh, the happiness that surrounds you includes the circumstances that surround you, the people that you're working with, and their brilliance and that kind of thing. So, um,
And that's very possible because every successful person has other people that they rely on, has other resources they rely on, and they do need to work in harmony with all of that.
yeah, and if we're working on a project, we always talk about doing the things that we're good at and delegating things out that we're not good at to complete the project. So that really kind of falls really right into place with that, and that tap into what you can do well, and then understand that everything out is out there for you to help.
And that also comes back up in Law 7, so we'll get to that shortly.
Absolutely. So, moving into law number 5, this is straight out of the law of attraction. This is the law of attention and desire. And whatever we put our attention on grows stronger in our lives. Intentions and desires released into silence have infinite organizing power. We can create the future we want by living in the present, which is, obviously that's one of his big things that he talks about. Not for the 2 or 3 weeks at a time, like we talk about in law number,
Right.
talking about getting into silence and just letting it kind of come to you by doing that without thinking and so on and so forth. Because the bottom line is there's a whole lot out there that we can't possibly put into words. And so if we can just put our attention and desire into that and kind of see what's coming there by, waiting for it and meditating and things like that a bit, things get organized and sometimes happen that way. So, and that's one of the well, whoever's talking about the law of attraction, that's a big part of it is intention and desire and just trusting that it's going to happen.
I think there was also a little more to that, because a lot of what I took away from that law was, what are your goals? What are you looking to do? If you're simply looking to make money or get something tangible for yourself, you know that's not going to take you anywhere. But if you're working on a project that's going to make your neighborhood better, your your country better, your world better. When you're trying to accomplish something that's bigger than yourself. See, that's what I took away from this, is that that was really what the intention and desire was. It's really about putting other things before yourself and working for the greater good. And as you do that, you get more and more of what you wanted anyway.
Yeah, it's really getting back to working on your purpose and your why, which we talk about all the time, and making your list of desires, putting together your personal strategic plan for every part of your life. And if you make that list of desires and write it down and so on, and that's in front of you, we talk about vision boards and things like that. That's a really, really big part of the intention side of things is making that list for the right reason.
Exactly.
So, and then law number 6, the law of detachment. And this is really the faith law. It's based upon our unquestioning belief in the power of our own self. Detachment is to live in wealth consciousness. The wisdom of uncertainty allows us to step into the field of all possibilities. So life, live it with passion, but be dispassionate about the outcome. And again, if you're coming from the right space, from your positive purpose and why for good and unconditional giving and that kind of thing, uh, this is really an important law to take a look at, is to detach a little bit and kind of trust that it's going to happen.
Yeah, this law is huge, and again, this is actually one that I had to go back a little bit, because in the book he actually explains it fairly badly. Because he talks about, well, to achieve your goal, separate yourself from the goal. And from a practical standpoint, that simply does not work. What was actually trying to say is that, going back to the fifth law, focus on what the intent is. Because the goal you've put together to get to that intent may not work, but you will find a better way to get to the intent. And this is something that's actually very, very common in military parlance. It's actually called the commander's intent, because every soldier know a plan never survives contact with the enemy. So when you're hitting the ground, when you're out there, the commander's not there. You have to be able to make changes on the fly based on circumstances. And what they're trained to do is keep the ultimate intent in mind. If they have to get there a different way, that's fine. And I think that's really what he's talking about. But the way he explained it, you had to go back a couple of times to go, wait a minute, what did he just say?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of summary statements that I saw there that do kind of put things together nicely with this is allowing yourself and others the freedom to be who they are, not trying to force solutions, allowing them to spontaneously emerge. And uncertainties is going to happen, and sometimes it's essential for the path to freedom here. So,
Yes.
um, again, I think this one he may have overcomplicated this by talking. Perhaps this book could have been a half an hour instead of an hour and a half or something. So, in fact, we're going to get this done in a half an hour. So maybe you can just listen to this all the time, and you'll have the whole book done.
There you go.
And the seventh and the final law is the law of dharma, and this is your purpose in life. To give is to get. We all have unique talents and a unique way to express them. We're all here for some reason. We're all here to rediscover our higher and spiritual self, and we're all here to serve beyond our own ego. And by doing that, we are united with everybody in spirit. So it's basically the essence of why we're here, and collaborating with everybody else, and why they're here too.
Yeah, and this was another one that I thought he didn't do as good a job as he could have describing, because he talks about, everybody has a unique talent, and you're not going to be successful until you figure out what that talent is. But I disagree with the idea that everybody is born with a unique talent. I think many people are very capable of developing that talent. And, I think a great example of that is Michael Jordan. In his early days, he was an absolutely horrible basketball player. He was told he would never play. And he decided that was what he wanted to do, and he learned the game, and he practiced and he practiced and drilled it in until he became the Michael Jordan we all know. So I think it's not so much about finding the talent you were born with. I think it's really, you have to find that talent that makes you whole, that makes you feel good. And if it's not something that you're good at immediately, you can work on it and you can build up that talent.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Dharma, we are no, we're not born with as a finished product. I mean, life is
Right.
a process, and the bottom line is you have to develop to make things, to make things work. So you are absolutely spot on as far as that goes. But what this is talking about is giving it away, and that's what this is. Really, that's kind of what this whole book, and it's really what life is all about, is giving.
Yeah, if you're not going to give, you're not going to get. And that's something we've talked about under a number of different books and topics.
Yep. And if you're not giving, you're going to be miserable for the rest of your life because you're going to be wondering why you didn't get. And the answer is right there.
Exactly. All right, so we're actually coming up against the end of our time. So, what do you think is the big takeaway from the book?
Well, starting with your purpose and why, it all goes back to that. And the most important thing, again, that we talked about is giving. So, kind of like summarizing the law of Dharma, it's talking about awakening the energies in yourself. And we talked about developing. Great way to do that is to list the talents and things that you're good at, but the things that you love to do and learn how to do them well. And the most important thing that you can ask yourself is these four words: how can I serve?
Absolutely. I think the big takeaway is that to really achieve your goals and really have, long-lasting success, you need to aim at accomplishing something bigger than yourself. I think that's really the key, is that whatever you're doing, do something that you see is going to affect people, that's going to help people. And as you try to do that, you'll find that you become more and more successful just from the effort of it. And I think that's a lot of what he talks about. You've been listening to the Success Showcase. You can catch us every week at xvadio.com/podcasts. We're part of the Xvadio Podcast Network, and you can find us on the iTunes Store, Apple Podcasts app, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and wherever you find podcasts. Remember, make this your best week ever and make next week even better. See you then.